pictures, of making the 40,000 times germ many, many thousand times larger still. And thus we saw all these things which our eyes of themselves could not see. Take a grain of sand, break it into 10 pieces. Take one piece and break it into 10. Break one of those pieces into 10, and one of those into 10, and one of those into 10, and one of those into 10, and do it all day, maybe. By sunset, you will have a piece as small as one of the germs. The boys were openly incredulous. Harelip sniffed and sneered, and Hoo-Hoo snickered, until Edwin nudged him to be silent. The wood tick sucks the blood of the dog, but the germ, being so very small, goes right into the blood of the body, and there it has many children. In those days, there would be as many as 1 billion, a crab shell, please, as many as that crab shell in one man's body. We call germs microorganisms. When a few million or 1 billion of them were in a man, in all the blood of a man, he was sick. These germs were a disease. There were many different kinds of them, more different kinds than there are grains of sand on this beach. We only knew a few of the kinds. The microorganic world was an invisible world, a world we could not see, and we knew very little about it. Yet we did know something. There was the Bacillus anthracis, there was the Micrococcus, there was the Bacterium termo, and the Bacterium lactis. That's what turns the goat milk sour even to this day, Harelip. And there were Schismomycetes without end, and there were many others. Here the old man launched into a disquisition on germs and their natures, using words and phrases of such extraordinary length and meaninglessness that the boys grinned at one another and looked out over the deserted ocean till they forgot the old man was babbling on. "But the Scarlet Death, Granser," Edwin at last suggested. Granser recollected himself, and with a start tore himself away from the rostrum of the lecture hall, where, to another world audience, he had been expounding the latest theory, 60 years gone, of germs and germ diseases. Yes, Edwin, I had forgotten. Sometimes the memory of the past is very strong upon me, and I forget that I am a dirty old man, clad in goat skin, wandering with my savage grandsons who are goatherds in the primeval wilderness. The fleeting systems lapse like foam, and so lapsed our glorious colossal civilization. I am Granser, a tired old man. I belong to the tribe of the Santa Rosans. I married into that tribe. My sons and daughters married into the chauffeurs, the Sacramentos, and the Palo Altos. You, Harelip, are of the chauffeurs. You, Edwin, are of the Sacramentos. And you, Hoo-Hoo, are of the Palo Altos. Your tribe takes its name from a town that was near the seat of another great institution of learning. It was called Stanford University. Yes, I remember now. It is perfectly clear. I was telling you of the Scarlet Death. Where was I in my story? You was telling about germs, the things you can't see but which make men sick, Edwin prompted. Yes, that's where I was. A man did not notice at first when only a few of these germs got into his body. But each germ broke in half and became 2 germs. And they kept doing this very rapidly, so that in a short time there were many millions of them in the body. Then the man was sick. He had a disease. And the disease was named after the kind of germ that was in him. It might be measles, it might be influenza, it might be yellow fever, it might be any of thousands and thousands of kinds of diseases. Now this is the strange thing about these germs. There were always new ones coming to live in men's bodies. Long and long and long ago, when there were only a few men in the world, there were few diseases. But as men increased and lived closely together in great cities and civilizations, new diseases arose. New kinds of germs entered their bodies. Thus were countless millions and billions of human beings killed. And the more thickly men packed together, the more terrible were the new diseases that came to be. Long before my time, in the Middle Ages, there was the Black Plague that swept across Europe. It swept across Europe many times. There was tuberculosis, that entered into men whenever they were thickly packed. 100 years before my time, there was the bubonic plague. And in Africa was the sleeping sickness. The bacteriologists fought all these diseases and destroyed them, just as you boys fight the wolves away from your goats, or squash the mosquitoes that light on you. The bacteriologist... But Granser, what do you call it? Edwin interrupted. You, Edwin, are a goat herd. Your task is to watch the goats. you know a great deal about goats. A bacteriologist watches germs. That is his task, and he knows a great deal about them. So, as I was saying, the bacteriologist fought with the germs and destroyed them, sometimes. There was leprosy, a horrible disease. 100 years before I was born, the bacteriologists discovered the germ of leprosy. They knew all about it. They made pictures of it. I have seen those pictures. But they never found a way to kill it. But in 1984, there was a pantoblast plague, a disease that broke out in a country called Brazil, and that killed millions of people. But the bacteriologists found it out, and found the way to kill it, so that the pantoblast plague went no farther. They made what they called a serum, which they put into a man's body, and which killed the pantoblast germs without killing the man. And in 1910, there was pellagra, and also the hookworm. These were easily killed by the bacteriologist. But in 1947, there arose a new disease that had never been seen before. It got into the bodies of babies of only 10 months old or less, and it made them unable to move their hands and feet, or to eat, or anything. And the bacteriologists were 11 years in discovering how to kill that particular germ and save the babies. In spite of all these diseases, and of all the new ones that continue to arise, there were more and more men in the world. This was because it was easy to get food. The easier it was to get food, the more men there were. The more men there were, the more thickly were they packed together on the earth. And the more thickly they were packed, the more new kinds of germs became diseases. There were warnings. Soldervetsky, as early as 1929, told the bacteriologists that they had no guarantee against some new disease, 1,000 times more deadly than any they knew, arising and killing by the hundreds of millions, and even by the billion. You see, the microorganic world remained a mystery to the end. They knew there was such a world, and that from time to time armies of new germs emerged from it to kill men. And that was all they knew about it. For all they knew, in that invisible microorganic world, there might be as many different kinds of germs as there are grains of sand on this beach. And also, in that same invisible world, it might well be that new kinds of germs came to be. It might be there that life originated, the abysmal fecundity, Solderevsky called it, applying the words of other men who had written before him. It was at this point that Harelip rose to his feet, an expression of huge contempt on his face. "Granser," he announced, "you make me sick with your gabble. Why don't you tell about the Red Death? If you ain't going to, say so, and we'll start back for camp." The old man looked at him and silently began to cry. The weak tears of age rolled down his cheeks, and all the feebleness of his 87 years showed in his grief-stricken countenance. "Sit down," Edwin counseled soothingly. "Granser's all right. He's just getting to the Scarlet Death, ain't you, Granser? He's just going to tell us about it right now. Sit down, Harelip. Go ahead, Granser." End of Section 2. Recording by James Christopher. jxchristopher@yahoo.com